Alright, new content. New content that isn't Mirror Dungeon, Intervallo, or Refraction Railway. Is it good? Well, I think it's pretty good. While I do have a few gripes with Refractrial and the way it's designed, I think it's a pretty good chunk of side content that they can build on further. This video will be recounting what I think and feel about the Refractrial. If you want a more critical video, I recommend checking out my buddy EchoS video, where he doesn't sugarcoat it and says it how it is. Oh, he's also Australian if that helps. I like Australia, it's pretty cool over there. I think one of the best choices in Refractrial is showing you before you start what different phases apply different buffs to your IDs. I don't like two of the most notable buffs, but I'll get into that later. However, warning you before on what you need to build for and what you need to look out for when it comes to the boss and your team actually feels a lot like building for a raid boss in a video game. And I like that. I like that aspect a lot. There's also a buff the boss gets in hard mode called a Tribulation, which the game warns you before you play into hard mode about. I think that's good. That's good design. It reminds me a lot of certain boss fights in Runa where you'd have to check the passives before fighting them, instead of just putting everything into the square hole and just getting results, like playing with a Heisho team, for example. I don't know, I just think it's neat. The little warning, the little information they give you, it's very nice. Formula and changes to the fight don't feel that different from the normal fight in the Intervallo. At least, that's in normal mode. One key thing to note is that status potency has been limited to 30, and status count has been limited to 10. Some people don't like this, but I actually like it a lot. Unless if you're running Burn, these caps actually make both potency appliers and count appliers equally valuable. And if you're playing with a status that spends count, you actually have to pay attention to make sure to utilize your status to its best potential. It actually made using syncing during this fight actually interesting instead of zero-braying it with Kyodia. We'll get into why I use syncing a little later. However, the only notable change that I've seen in Phase 1 besides what I've noted so far is the factor that Kira is in here. You do not have your assist ally unit, and it really doesn't change much about the fight. I think one of the most notable changes in this fight comes to Phase 2. Phase 2 starts out with a bunch of syncing and bleed being applied to your units. Now, I know that sounds bad. Hear me out. Now, I know y'all hate the Dulcina fight. I get it. But let's get two major factors about the way this boss is designed out of the way, for the syncing and the bleed. First is the factor, on Clash Lose, even with Unbreakables, Rufu cannot activate your syncing if she loses a clash. And as long as you're utilizing ego and other resources you've built up throughout the fight, this shouldn't be too hard to do, especially on normal. The next thing is about the bleed. Yeah, no, it's a little fucking crazy, I understand you. But, hear me out, you have plenty of resources built up over the fight to use healing ego, but also it forces you into decision making around that bleed. Due to the factor you can send a unit with low health to clash against a very powerful skill of hers, and even if she wins the clash, as long as the unit dies from bleed, she will not do the skill. So trading out one unit to make sure the rest don't get hit and getting a new fresh unit right off of them is actually pretty good. It's a choice you have to make, either between one unit or all of your units losing SP from the syncing, or you could just, you know, win the clash of an ego, but still. This is the type of risk assessment I like from this game. And the last great thing I have to say about this is the factor that you can use multiple team loadouts for one fight. There's a built-in feature for Refractrial that lets you save and come back later, which allows you to completely swap out to a different team, keeping HP, SP, and ego resources. The only bad thing I have to say about this is I don't like how it's encouraged because it takes off the bleed and syncing from your units. But I mean, it's not necessary to engage with this content with two separate teams. You can easily do it in one. Well, not easily. Well, not easily. Actually, I take that back. Not easily. I want to get this out of the way. I don't mind Tribulations as a concept. I don't think it was executed the most interestingly for this one, but I give it some leeway considering this is the first Refractrial, making clashes harder, making the enemy apply more status effects, give the enemy more HP. That makes sense. One thing that just bugs me a little bit is the factor that she heals SP right before using her big fuck off skill now. I don't think that was a good design choice, considering the factor she already has insane clashing from her special status effects she applies, and how her unbreakables will apply that status effect anyways, meaning she most likely will be at max SP while using her big fuck off skill. That, in my experience, even made Rien Sang's Furioso replica have a struggling clash. Seriously, no joke, this shit was struggling. I don't know, this just might be a me complaint, but it feels like it's just shoehorning in difficulty in this specific instance to the point where I need to use high clashing ego or I'm going to lose. Recording this now, I realized I really could have just used Durante. Huh. Well, whatever. I don't have a major gripe with this, I'm a little iffy about how it's implemented so far, and I hope it gets improved on in the future. Now, what I can say that I didn't like about this... I think one major thing that can shoehorn all my problems with the way this Refractrial was designed is with the buffs to your IDs in particular. The Shade of Reflection Rogue is applied in Phase 1, and it makes it so less skills or skills that inflict bleed deal plus 25% damage. For ego skills, they deal plus 100% damage instead. Also, enemies take 1.5 times as much damage for bleed rounded down. Shade of Reflection Blue does the same thing with sinking and gloom skills, but also gives enemies in panic 3 fragile, and the finger faction identities deal plus 15% damage and take minus 15% damage from enemies. This is just my opinion, but this is bad. I think this is bad. Completely stunting team variety for the sake of very good buffs isn't the most fun thing ever. The best way to win this fight in the least amount of turns is to use either a ring team or blood fiends, and then utilize a sinking team, including the index IDs. I just think that's stupid and really limiting. I don't know. I will admit this isn't one of my most solid points. It's very subjective, and you may actually like it, which I do respect. But I think compared to the main bosses taking more damage from certain status effects and taking less damage from all other status effects, this just encourages to use one status effect over the other, and I don't think that's fun. Of course, there's a few notable exceptions to this, like using a Heisho team, and that's just fucking boring. And I will say, it doesn't completely make you unable to get the clear conditions for extra rewards. You can still use other status effects, but I do feel like it's kind of a punch in the nuts for people who do not have either bleed or sinking teams built up at the moment. Surprisingly, in the day of modern MD farming, people still do have lives and still do not have the time to build up these said teams. So I think kind of inadvertently punishing people for not using either bleed or sinking for the different phases, it's just, I don't get the thought behind it. Do I think the Refractrial event overall was bad? No. Not by any means whatsoever. I had a blast fighting Rufo personally, and I'm excited to see what they do in the future more with this base form of new content, and what improvements they make. However, just because I like it doesn't mean it's free from others' criticism, as it is definitely not for everybody. I hope in the future this mode is more thoroughly designed, with both the bosses and the players in mind. My overall score for Refractrial is a 7 out of 10. I personally can't see the replayability factor in it unless if you didn't complete the turn challenges, but I'm excited for what they do in the future with this concept. Alright, that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching.